Okay. कार्बण्य दोषपतः स्वभावः पृच्छन्नि त्वं धर्मासुतच्युतः।
Alarm off.
Này,
Better. The YouTube session live ठेवलेलं आहे. आपण आय थिंक ह्याच्यावरती आलो होतो ना, 10 पर्यंत होतील मला असं वाटतं. थिंक स्टार्टेड विथ
काही मेसेज पाठवले का?
आहे माझ्याकडे. नाही ते येतील ते येतील नंतर.
किती पर्यंत झालं होतं असं? हे पार हवंय का समोर?
नाही तर
गरम
म्हटलं थोडीशी वाट पण चेपली जाईल. So 2.5 झालं होतं आय थिंक.
ओके 2.5
या 2.6 नाही 2.6 झालं होतं. 2.7 2.8 2.9 2.10 चार करायचा प्रयत्न करतो. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishaya Bhutale Srimate Kumar Krishna Goswami Prabhupada Sahitamya श्रील प्रभुपाद की चालू करायचं आपलं की काय?
Namaste ji. We joined online today.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I was not feeling well.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
No issues.
Maybe we should turn around so that पाठ हो रहा है.
बंद करो.
Turn around like this.
I'll just stop.
किंवा ते तुझ्यावर ठेवणे हे माझ्यावर ठेवणे.
ठीक आहे ना, आपण बाजूला असतो.
Is Yashaswini with you, Mataji?
She is coming ji. She is still getting ready.
Okay. But we will begin.
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ओम Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Namaha Pankajanabhaya Namaha Pankajamalini Namaha Pankajanetraya Namaste Pankajangrehe. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjanashalakaya
Chakshurunmilitam
Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Dev Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesh
Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute.
Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami
Hare
Panchakalpatarubhyascha
Krapa Sindhubhyev cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo
Namo Namaha.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare
Hare
Rama
Rama Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare
Hare
Krishna
Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Rama
Hare
Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Hare
Hare
Rama.
Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Thank you so much for coming to the class virtually. I hope Mataji you will feel better soon. So I think we, from what I remember last time, we finished the sixth verse of the second chapter. So the acronym again for this chapter is Gita. So we are still in the G portion, which is focusing on Guru. So the idea is, or I guess the concept is, Krishna now is going to be, I mean, I guess Arjuna is now going to treat Krishna not only as his friend and cousin, but is actually taking or asking for his advice, and advice not as a mere friend advice, but advice as a guru, as a spiritual master. So that's where we begin verse 6.7, or rather 2.7, which still continues to, like, Arjuna is still talking about, is in the last phases of kind of giving up the fight, and not going to be able to fight the battle. So, Yashashwini Mataji, can you say the verse, please?
7th, right?
7th, yes.
Karpanya.
Karpanya dosha.
Karpanya dosha svabhava.
Punyadoshabhata svabhavaha.
Sorry. Karpanya dosha. Doshopatta swabhavaha.
ఇది వాడు ఇది వస్తుంది నచ్చేదాన్ని.
I think it's the 2. Karpanya doshopatta swabhavaha.
కార్పణ్య
Svabhavaha.
Pratami tvam dharma sammudhachetaah.
Pruchhami tvam
sammudhachetaah.
Yatrayasyanishtitam bruhitanme.
Yashreyasyanishchitam bruhitanme.
Yoshyasteham shadhiman tvam prapannam.
Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. Thank you, Mataji. So we'll say the synonyms and then we'll do the translation and purport. Synonyms: Karpanya, of the miserliness; dosha, by the weakness; upahata, being afflicted; swabhavaha, characteristics; pritchami, I am asking; tvam, unto you; dharma, religion; sammudha, bewildered; chetaha, in the heart; yat, what; shreyaha, all good; syat, maybe; nishchitam, certainly; bruhi, tell; tat, that; may, unto me; shishyaha, disciple; te, your; aham, I am; shadi, just instruct; mam, me; tvam, unto you; prapannam, surrendered. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: Now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple, a surrendered soul unto you. A surrendered soul unto you. Please instruct me. So in this verse, again, we'll go through the purport, but Arjuna is confused about what his duty is, and he's perplexed. So Srila Prabhupada here will talk about the reasons of him being perplexed in the purport in a lot of details, and he gives an example of fire that takes place in a forest without nobody actually planting that fire. So it just come on its own, and then there is a whole wild forest that happens. Actually, sometimes it is ignited by somebody, some mischievous people, but a lot of times it happens on its own. So Prabhupada will kind of identify why that is happening in our lives, why there is perplexity in our life, and how we can kind of get over it, or how we can resolve it. So, Mataji, you want to say the purport?
Purport. By nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. In every step, there is perplexity, and therefore it behoves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. All Vedic literatures advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities of life, which happen without our desire. They are like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. Similarly, the world situation is such that perplexities of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. No one wants fire, or yet it takes place, and we become perplexed. The Vedic wisdom therefore advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a spiritual master who is in the discipline succession. A person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. One should not therefore remain in material perplexities but should approach a spiritual master. This is the purport of this verse. Who is the man in material perplexities? It is he who does not understand the problems of life. In the Brihat Aranyaka Upanishad, the perplexed man is described as follows. Yo, yo, Yova etat akaram garge advaita sma lokat pratiti sa kripanaha. He is the miserable man who does not solve the problems of life as a human, who thus quits the world like the cats and dogs without understanding the science of self realization. This human form of life is the most valuable asset for the living entity, who can utilize it for solving the problems of life. Therefore, one who does not utilize this opportunity properly is a miser. On the other hand, there is a Brahmana, and who is intellect enough to utilize this body to solve all the problems of life. Etat akaram aksharam gar, gargi vidhi lokat pratiti sa brahmana. The Kripanas are miserable persons waste their time in being overly affectionate for family, society, country, etc. in the material conception of life. One is often attached to family life, namely to wife, children, and other members on the basis of skin disease. The Krupana thinks that he is able to protect his family members from death, or the Krupana thinks that his family or society can save him from the verge of death. Such family attachment can be found even in the lower environments who take care of children also. Being intelligent, Arjuna could understand that his affection for family members and his wish to protect them from death were the causes of his perplexities. Although he could understand that his duty to fight was awaiting him, still on account of miserable weakness, he could not discharge the duties. He is therefore asking Lord Krishna, the supreme spiritual master, to make a definite solution. He offers himself to Krishna as a disciple. He wants to stop friendly talks. Talks between the master and the disciple are serious. And now Arjuna wants to talk very seriously before the recognized spiritual master. Krishna is therefore the original spiritual master of the science of Bhagavad Gita. And Arjuna is the first disciple for understanding the Gita. How Arjuna understands the Bhagavad Gita is stated in the Gita itself. And yet foolish, mundane scholars explain that one need not submit to Krishna as a person, but to the unborn within Krishna. There is no difference between a Krishna within and without. And one who has no sense of this understanding is the greatest fool in trying to understand Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. So I think there are a couple of things that I wanted to kind of bring up in this purport. The way it's been, that's my realization actually, is like one is that Krishna, there is no difference between Krishna within and without, but Prabhupada emphasizes Krishna as a person. So in a lot of I guess commentaries of Bhagavad Gita, what is lost is actually the fact that Krishna is actually a person. We a lot of times in some philosophies, Krishna is considered more as a concept, and God, and anybody can be God is what they preach. But Prabhupada in his literature or his explanations of literature, he clearly specifies who is Bhagwan, who is Paramatma, and where does the whole Brahman realization uh, lies. So the example is always given of sunlight. The sunlight is equivalent to the Brahman. The sun planet itself is reflected, or the sun surface is the representation of Paramatma, but the actual sun deity or sun god or sun planet is the personal form of Krishna or God that is emphasized. The other thing is actually about surrendering to Guru. So when we are perplexed in certain situations, we actually should approach a bona fide spiritual master. So bona fide is a key word there, because there is a lot of, in this day and age, there are a lot of bogus gurus. Like they may have little bit of parampara, but that parampara actually doesn't go all the way to Krishna. They somewhere down the line it gets concocted, and that becomes the parampara at that time. But that's not the true sense of parampara. Parampara should always start from Krishna. So in this case, I remember one example actually, like how much you are surrendered will determine how the Guru will give benediction to you, or how much you, in the surrendered sense, you approach to a Guru, the Guru will reciprocate accordingly to you. So one of the examples that comes actually today is his disappearance day, is in one of the gurus in this parampara. So our parampara starts like in our case, me and my Mataji's case, it starts with our guru, which is Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, then Srila Prabhupada, then Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and then Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. So today is actually his disappearance day. He passed away on the Ekadashi in the Kartik month, in the very auspicious day actually, right? If you have to pass away, he was a very great devotee of the Lord. In fact, he was actually not learned. He came in from a Vaishya family. So he was a farmer, he had a family, he had wife, and when his wife passed away, he actually quit living in the material world, so to speak, and renounced, and went to Vrindavan, stayed there for 30 years, did his bhajan, then went to Mayapur Dham near Bengal. And that's where he got associated with Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's father. So one of the things aspect that comes into mind about Gaur Kishore Das Babaji is like he was so renunciate, he would not even he did not have any money. He was like poorest of poorest people in that whole, and he did not really want anything. Like he did not want disciples, he did not want any prestige. All he would do is chant, and even sometimes he would chant like we chant on a bead mala. He would actually make bead mala by just tying up knots, 108 knots on a piece of cloth, and that's how he would chant. So that was how much his renunciation was there. He would actually for food, he would beg food. He would get some rice, he would dip it in water, keep it for some time, put some salt, and that's how he would eat. Even clothes, he would actually, so if he was always wearing torn clothes, because he was picking up clothes that were discarded actually in by the people, either on the street or on, so he would live on the Ganges river. So there are a lot of times people leave the clothes there, the dirty clothes. So he'll just use them as his clothing. So Bhakti Vinod Thakur told his son, so Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was his youngest son. So he told that he needs to get Diksha from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, actually, his guru was not Bhakti. If you look at the Guru Parampara, actually, Guru Parampara, and I'll share a quick screen of this. Let's see. शेअर कसं करायचं का? So this so Srila Prabhupada, then Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and then Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, and then Bhakti Vinod Thakur. So the Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually asked Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur to take Diksha from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. He did not want to give his own Diksha. Even though actually Bhakti Vinod Thakur was Shiksha Guru of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. So he would actually come in, and when there were Bhagavatam classes conducted by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he would actually come and listen to those lectures when he was in Mayapur. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur approached in a very humble way. He was actually very learned. So Bhakti Siddhanta Gaur Kishore Das Babaji initially rejected that proposal. It's like, okay, now you are too learned. I cannot give you Diksha. Your father is is my actual Shiksha Guru. How can I give you Diksha? So one thing led to another, and he would always, whenever he'd approach Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, he was always rejected as a disciple. So eventually Bhakti Vinod Thakur said, if you have to take Diksha from him, until you take Diksha from him, don't enter into this house. So that kind of was the breaking point for Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said, so there was a bridge that he would always cross. So he said to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji that I want to have your Diksha, but if you are not willing to give me the Diksha, then I'm going to commit suicide on that bridge. That was kind of his intense desire to have a guru and have a Diksha from a bona fide disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji, who was in the parampara of Jagannath Das Babaji. So that's kind of what my realization of this is like. You have to approach in a very surrendered way to a spiritual master who is actually in the disciplic succession. That's my realization. Mother, do you have any? So any questions, any realizations, Mataji, before we continue?
No, like so this is disappearance day of Bhakti Vinodji or Gaur Kishore?
Gaur Kishore Das Babaji.
Gaur Kishore Das.
All right. So we'll continue with the next verse, 2.8.
Sorry. Nahi prapashyami mamapanudhyat.
Nahi prashani mamapanudyat.
Yachogamucho janayandriyanam.
Shanamindriyam
Avapya bhuma vasapatnamritam.
Avapya Bhuma Vasapat
Vasapatnamrutam
Rajyam suranamapi chaधिपत्यम्.
Rajyam Suranam Api Chadhipatyam. Synonyms: no, do not, he, certainly, prapashyami, I see, mama, my, apanu dyat, can drive away, yat, that which, shokam, lamentation, uchoshanam, drying up, indriyanam, of the senses, avapya, achieving, bhumau, on the earth, asaptanam, without rival, riddham, prosperous, rajyam, kingdom, suranam, of the demigods, api, even, cha, also, adhipatyam, supremacy. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. You want to say the purport, Mataji?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. Although Arjuna was putting forward so many arguments based on knowledge of principles of religion and moral codes, it appears that he was unable to solve his real problem without the help of the spiritual master, Lord Sri Krishna. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were drawing away his whole existence, and it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master like Lord Krishna. Academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, and are all useless in solving the problems of life. Help can be given by a spiritual master like Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is that a spiritual master who is 100% Krishna's conscious is a bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. Lord Chaitanya said that one who is a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, regardless of his social position, is a real spiritual master. Kripa Vripa Kibanyasi Shudra Kininaya Ye Krishna Tattvayitasi Guru Haya. It does not matter whether a person is a Vipra, learned scholar in Vedic wisdom, or is born in a lower family, or is in the renounced order of life. If he is a master in the science of Krishna, he is perfect and a bona fide spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 8.9. So without being a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, no one is a bona fide spiritual master. It is also said in the Vedic literature, Shatkar Manipan Puno Vipro Mantra Tantra Visharadaha Vaishnavo Guru Nasyad Vaishnavaswapako Guru Swapacho. A scholarly Brahmana, expert in all subjects of Vedic knowledge, is fit to become a spiritual master without being a Vaishnava or an expert in the science of Krishna consciousness. But a family born in a lower caste can become a spiritual master if he is a Vaishnava or Krishna consciousness. Padma Purana. The problems of material existence, birth, old age, disease, and death cannot be counteracted by accumulation of wealth and economic development. In many parts of the world, there are states which are replete with all facilities of life, which are full of wealth and commonly economically developed, yet in the problems of material existence are still present. They are seeking peace in different ways, but they can achieve real happiness only if they consult Krishna or Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the constitute of the science of Krishna, born through the bona fide representation of Krishna, the man in Krishna consciousness. If economic development and material comforts could drive away one's lamentation for family, social, national, or international inebriaties, then Arjuna would not have said that even an unrivaled kingdom or on earth or supremacy like that of the demigods in heavenly planets would be unable to drive away his lamentations. He sought therefore refuge in Krishna consciousness, and that is the right path for peace and harmony. Economic development or supremacy over the world can be finished at any moment by the cataclysms of material nature. Even the elevation to a higher planetary situation, as the men are now seeking on the moon planet, can also be finished at one stroke. The Bhagavad Gita confirms this. Punyarmartya lokam vishanti. When the results of these activities are finished, one falls down again from the peak of happiness to the lowest status of life. Many politicians of the world have fallen down in that way. Such downfalls can only constitute more causes for lamentation. Therefore, if we want to curb lamentation for good, then we have to take the shelter of Krishna as Arjuna is seeking to do. So Arjuna asked Krishna to solve his problem definitely, and that is the way of Krishna consciousness.
Thank you, Mataji. So, I think this purport is like it's a long purport, but I think one of the aspects here that I've come to realize is actually the example of Srila Prabhupada himself. So when he came in 1965 to America, actually he was told, at that time, sannyasis were actually not supposed to be using any travel mechanism. They would always, that was kind of the philosophy, is like sannyasi should be renunciate. You should give up every single thing, every single luxuries of life. But even his guru or even his guru's guru, that's where they started actually using these material equipments, if you will, or travels. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he used to travel in car. So he was one of the first Gaudiya Vaishnava guru who would actually use the material things for the benefit of mankind, and he would use that for preaching purposes. Same thing. So when Prabhupada came here, at that time in 60s, America was opulent, right? There was a lot of opulence there. It was one of the, after the Second World Wars, there like 20 years had already passed. There was all this competition between America and USSR at that time. So there was a lot of opulence in America here. But then even there, as Prabhupada mentions in his purport, actually he found out people who were lamenting and who were actually pining for something, like there has to be something beyond this material opulence that they were exhibiting. In fact, some of his disciples were millionaires' kids, actually. So they used to have a lot of property. I mean, Alfred Ford, he is one of the grandsons of Ford, right? So he's very opulent. He was brought in that opulence there, but he became a surrendered disciple, and he used his actual income that he was getting from his family, from his business. He helped establish so many different temples. Like we went to a temple in Hawaii. Apparently, it was donated by Alfred Ford. So he goes by Ambarish Prabhu. In fact, he's also the president of TOVP, which is a Vedic planetarium that they are trying to establish in Mayapur, which is the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They are establishing a huge temple there. And one of the aspects of that temple is they would have a planetarium that is more focused on how Vedas consider our universe as, not the mundane universe that we see with our eyes, but actually there is more to it, right? There we have 14 planetary systems. So they are going to have, apart from being a temple itself, they are going to showcase that aspect of Vedas that's never been depicted in any other temple. So that's kind of a quick realization from that verse. Mataji, you have anything? Okay. All right. So we'll continue with verse 9, unless Mataji, you have any questions.
No, Ji.
Sanjay Uvacha
Sanjaya Uvacha
Eva Mukta Hrishikesham
Mukta Rishikesha
Rakesha Parantapa
Gudakesha Param Tapa
Nayotsa Iti Govindam
Nayotsa Iti Govindam
Upatushni Babuvaha
Bhukta Tushim Babuva. Synonyms. Sanjay Uvacha Evam, thus Uktva, speaking, Rishikesham, on to Krishna, the master of senses, Gudakesha, Arjun, the master of curbing ignorance, Parantapa, the chastiser of enemies, Na Yotse, I shall not fight, Iti, thus Govindam, on to Krishna, the giver of pleasure of the senses, Uktva, saying, Tuchinim, silent, Babhuva, became, her, certainly. Sanjaya said, translation purport by Srila Prabhupada, Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. So here in this verse, interestingly, Krishna is referred as Rishikesham, which is master of senses, and also he is referred to as Govindam, which is giver of pleasure to the senses. So he is a master as well as pleasure giver to the senses, which is interesting. And Arjuna is also referred here as chastiser of enemies. So in not so subtle ways, actually, not so subtle ways, Sanjay is actually, at this point, Sanjay is telling this whole incident to Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra is, his mindset is like, oh, now Arjuna is not going to fight. So he is now tempted and kind of happy that Arjuna is not going to fight, because Arjuna was the biggest warrior in their army, in Pandava's army. If Arjuna is not going to fight, that battle will be won pretty quickly. So he was kind of in his mind thinking that, oh, okay, this battle is almost going to be won in my favor. But Sanjaya is like, in a way, re-emphasizing the identity of Arjuna, which is chastiser of enemies. So that was very interesting. So, Pavitra Mataji, you want to say?
This is self-explanatory.
Okay, perfect. You want to read
Oh,
that?
read the purport. 9. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Dhritarashtra must have been Dhritarashtra must have been very glad to understand that Arjuna was not going to fight and was instead leaving the battlefield for the begging profession. But Sanjaya disappointed him again in relating that Arjuna was competent to kill his enemies, Parantapa. Although Arjuna was for the time being overwhelmed with false grief due to family affection, he surrendered unto Krishna, the supreme spiritual master, as a disciple. This indicated that he would soon be free from the false lamentation resulting from family affection and would be enlightened with perfect knowledge of self realization or Krishna consciousness, and would then surely fight. Thus, Dhritarashtra's joy would be frustrated since Arjuna would be enlightened by Krishna and would fight to the end.
Thank you. Okay. Any realizations, Mataji, or we can continue?
No, ji, we can continue. Did you have a question, Linda? So understand? Yeah.
Tamuvacha ऋषिकेशः
प्रहसन्निव भारत
प्रहसन्निव भारत
सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये
सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये
विषीदन्तमिदं वचः
विषीदन्तमिदं वचः. Synonyms: Tam, onto him, Uvacha, said, Rishikesha, master of senses, Krishna, Prahasan, smiling, Iva, like that, Bharata, O Dhritarashtra, descendant of Bharata, Senayoho, of the armies, Ubhayo, of both parties, Madhye, between, Vishidantam, onto the lamenting one, Idam, the following word, the following Vachaha, words. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. O descendant of Bharat, at the time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. So interestingly, now Krishna is smiling here. So we'll see how Prabhupada explains that in the purport. The talk, and I'll say the purport, the talk was going on between intimate friends, namely Rishikesha and Gudakesha. So Rishikesha is Krishna and Gudakesha is Arjuna. As friends, both of them were on the same level. But one of them had voluntarily become student of the other. Krishna was smiling because a friend had chosen to become a disciple. As the Lord of all, he is always in the superior position as the master of everyone. And yet the Lord agrees to be a friend, to be a son, or a lover of a devotee who wants him in that such role. But when he is accepted as a master, he at once assumed that role and talked with the disciple like the master, with gravity as it is required. It appears that the talk between master and disciple was openly exchanged in the presence of both armies, so that all were benefited. So the talks of Bhagavad Gita are not for any particular person, society, or community, but they are for all. and friends or enemies are equally entitled to hear them. So this is a very wonderful explanation actually of how Krishna is accepting Arjuna as his disciple. I mean, that's why even Prabhupada used to first thing he taught to his disciples or his they were not even disciples. Like he would um, go on chanting of Hare Krishna mantra to his followers. At that time, he had initially he had gotten some people who would come in and listen to his lectures. And actually, the aspect of what attracted to some of these initial people was the melodious voice of Prabhupada, and he would actually freely chant these the Hare Krishna mantra to anybody. And in his purports, he actually writes it like Hare Krishna mantra can be spoken by anybody. Like they don't have to, they can be meat eaters, they can be whatever kind of people. It is so pure that it will actually make people who are impure like me pure, or at least try to be pure. If I chant these rounds and do my sadhana really well, then maybe I have a hope that I will be pure. So kind of similar to this, like this whole intimate chat between two friends, now it is between guru and shishya, will now transform into a chat for all of us to listen in and kind of get a lot of benefit from it. So that's where the G ends, the G portion of our acronym for this chapter ends. From the next class onwards, we can start with the I, which is identity. So any realizations, Mataji? Okay. Any questions, Yashaswini Mataji? You have anything?
No. So you understand? You should be good. Yes. You should be good. The master spiritual thinking. Spiritual path. Yeah.
Okay. So with that being said, I think we are kind of a little late today. Actually, unfortunately, we weren't able to do the japa chanting. But please do the chanting definitely at home. I know Mataji, you have Ekadashi today, so I know you'll be doing really well. So we'll say our ending prayers. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha
कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः
Jai
श्रीकृष्ण
Shri Krishna Chaitanya
प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री
Shri
अद्वैत
Advaita
गदाधर
Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama
Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna
हरे
Hare Hare
हरे
Hare Rama Hare Rama Rama
Hare
Rama
Rama, Hare
Hare
Rama.
Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama
हरे
Rama Rama
राम राम हरे हरे
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji.
Very
Hare Krishna.